The flight where everything changed. Melissa Hanover moved briskly through the gleaming halls of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. The rhythmic clack of her designer heels echoed off the polished floors, matching the elegant swing of her sleek carry-on trailing behind her. For Melissa, air travel was a routine she had perfected over years of business trips and personal vacations. Her flight this morning was no exception. Dallas to Washington, D.C., first class, as always. Flying first class wasn't a luxury for Melissa, it was a necessity. It wasn't just about the wider seats or complimentary champagne. It was about status, about keeping herself surrounded by people who, in her mind, belonged there. The executives in expensive suits, the politicians exchanging whispered strategies, the influencers wearing sunglasses indoors. It was her world. Controlled. Predictable. At least, it had been. Until today. As Melissa approached her row, she saw a man already seated beside her, his presence causing her steps to falter for just a moment. He was a black man dressed sharply in a navy suit, his posture straight, his expression focused. A slim laptop was open on his tray table, and his eyes scanned whatever was on the screen with quiet intensity. Something about him unsettled her. She wasn't sure what irritated her most, the fact that he didn't look up when she arrived, or the way he seemed completely at ease in a space she thought of as reserved. He didn't show deference. He didn't acknowledge her presence. He simply existed, confident and unbothered. Melissa's fingers tightened on the handle of her carry-on. She took her seat with a little more force than necessary, setting her tote bag down between her feet as if staking her claim. She glanced around casually, but in reality, she was expecting someone to take notice. A flight attendant, maybe. Someone who would recognize that something was amiss. Nothing happened. The man beside her kept working. He didn't glance at her when she shifted in her seat or when she bumped the shared armrest with her purse. He didn't react when she cleared her throat, or when she sat up straighter and made an exaggerated show of checking her seat assignment, as if expecting an error to appear. Still nothing. The man, whose boarding pass labeled him as Marcus Reed, kept typing, his fingers moving with precise ease over the keyboard. The faint glow from his laptop reflected against his dark skin, accentuating the clean line of his jaw and the sharp angle of his cheekbones. Melissa couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong here. She didn't have proof. She didn't need it. After all, people like her knew these things. Melissa leaned subtly toward Marcus. "Excuse me," she said in her most practiced tone, soft but edged with polite suspicion. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Without looking away from his screen, Marcus replied. "Yes. Just that. No explanation. No apology. No acknowledgement of her implied accusation." Melissa blinked. It was not the response she expected. She glanced around again, as if the flight attendants might sense the imbalance in the universe and intervene. None came. She considered leaving it alone. Briefly. But Melissa Hanover was not the kind of woman to leave things alone. She raised her hand slightly, drawing the attention of the nearest flight attendant, a woman in her early 30s named Jenna Adams. Jenna smiled as she approached, her posture professional and warm. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" Melissa returned the smile with one of her own, tight, restrained. "I think there's been a little mix-up," she said, gesturing discreetly toward Marcus. "I believe this gentleman may be in the wrong seat." Jenna's expression remained neutral as she glanced at Marcus. He paused his typing, looking up for the first time. His eyes, dark and unreadable, met Jenna's with a calm that Melissa found unnerving. Jenna pulled up the passenger manifest on her tablet, her fingers tapping efficiently. "Mr. Reed is in the correct seat, ma'am," she said after a moment. "You're in 3A, and he's in 3B. Melissa's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she smoothed it over. "Oh," she said with a forced chuckle. "That's odd. I just assumed." "I understand," Jenna said smoothly. "But everything is in order." Jenna turned to leave, but Melissa wasn't finished. Not yet. She nodded as if satisfied, then turned toward the window. But her mind was already working. Minutes passed. Marcus had gone back to typing. Melissa sat stiffly, arms crossed. She watched him from the corner of her eye. He wasn't reacting. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't offering her the reassurances she had come to expect when she challenged someone's presence. It was infuriating. She pressed the call button again. Jenna returned promptly. "Ma'am." Melissa lowered her voice, careful now. "I'd like to request a seat change." Jenna's brow furrowed slightly. "Is there something wrong with your seat, ma'am?" Melissa exhaled, keeping her expression measured. "It's not the seat," she said, glancing toward Marcus and then back at Jenna. I don't feel comfortable." There it was. The line that always worked. The line that triggered concern. Action. Jenna's expression shifted, just slightly. "Let me check if there are any available seats," she said. Melissa nodded, smoothing her skirt. After a moment, Jenna returned. "I'm afraid we're at full capacity in first class today," she said. Melissa frowned. "What about economy?" Jenna hesitated. "There are a couple of seats in economy." Melissa smiled tightly. "Perfect. He can take one of them." The silence that followed was different from before. It was heavy, intense. Jenna didn't move. She didn't smile. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "Mr. Reed has a ticket for first class. He will remain in his seat." Melissa's expression froze. "Excuse me. You asked for another seat," Jenna continued calmly. "You're welcome to move to economy if you prefer." Melissa's face flushed hot. Her mind raced. "I don't think this is fair," she said. "I have a right to feel safe." The word hung there. Safe. Jenna's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," she said quietly but firmly, "are you saying you feel threatened?" Melissa shrugged delicately. "I didn't say that. I just don't feel comfortable." Across the aisle, a passenger muttered something under his breath. Another glanced up from her phone. People were watching now. Jenna straightened. "There's no safety issue here, ma'am. Mr. Reed is seated correctly. If you can't comply with crew instructions, we'll have to delay takeoff while we resolve this." Melissa's pulse pounded. This wasn't going the way it should. She was supposed to be protected. Defended. She tried again. "I'm just asking for an accommodation," she said, her voice tight. "Why is that so hard?" Jenna's patience had clearly thinned. "Because what you're asking for isn't an accommodation," she said. "It's discrimination." The words cut through the cabin like a blade. More heads turned. A phone appeared from nowhere, pointed discreetly in Melissa's direction. And still, Marcus hadn't said a word. Until now. He closed his laptop, placed it neatly on his tray table, and reached into his jacket pocket. Melissa's breath caught as he produced a leather badge holder. He flipped it open. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The gold shield gleamed under the lights. The silence in the cabin deepened. Marcus spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, smooth, controlled. "Would you like to make an official statement, ma'am?" Melissa couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "This is a serious allegation," Marcus continued. "And you've made it in front of witnesses. If you believe I've done something inappropriate, I'd be happy to take your statement." Melissa shook her head slowly, her throat dry. "No," she whispered. He nodded once. "Understood." He closed his badge holder and reopened his laptop, resuming his work as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and everyone knew it. By the time the flight landed in D.C., the video had gone viral. It showed Melissa's calm confidence unraveling into something desperate and ugly. It showed Marcus remaining silent until it mattered. It showed Jenna standing firm. Melissa's phone buzzed constantly. Messages from colleagues. From friends. From family. "Is this you? What were you thinking?" "Oh my God, Melissa." By the time she reached baggage claim, the first reporter had found her. "Ms. Hanover, do you have a comment on the video?" She kept walking. Melissa's career ended that week. She stepped down from 3 boards. Lost 2 clients. The charity she had chaired released a statement denouncing her behavior. She stopped answering her phone. She avoided social media. But it didn't stop. And Marcus? He never thought of her again. Because for him, it was just another Tuesday.